This is the biggest chapter of Hunter x Hunter yet. Legitimately, this is bigger than the return of Hisoka, because Togashi is now beginning to answer questions that have been lingering for quite literally 2 decades. We've seen Kurapika's story, and now this is the B-side of the Kyoto massacre, including a massive character revelation that I never even came close to suspecting, as well as connections that will blow you away, and most importantly, why the death of the Phantom Troop is now practically set in stone. I had to take a lot of time with this chapter, because you don't quite get the full scale of it with just one read. This chapter made me go back and read other parts of Hunter x Hunter because it's starting to link so much together. And this is definitely my favorite chapter by far of the new batch. And it starts in an interesting place, giving us a meeting between the Mafia factions and the Cyradnik squad, which kind of came out of nowhere to me, but it's really emphasizing the everybody versus Morena factional divide that's happening on the lower tiers, which is exciting because I'm honestly far more interested in the Hailey family than I am like any of the princes. But now I also have this profound feeling of dread that I've only ever felt once before in the series, and that was when Neferpito was born during the Ant arc. I think we're at a turning point with the Hailey family, and the troop emphasized this by discovering one of their hidey holes and giving them a shocking amount of credit. The idea that there's something deeply unsettling about this group being able to detect the troop and act accordingly. Because being real, the Chimera Ants didn't really start out as a threat. I mean, they were just piles and piles of fodder for quite some time. But then they reached a critical point where they became not just a threat, but like the center of a dread galaxy. And all I'm saying is this feels very familiar right now with the Hailey family. It's also not a great sign that this panel of the Phantom Troop has the number 4 behind them, because in Japanese, the number 4 is often associated with death, as it can be read as she, which also means to die. So taken in a certain way, death is currently stalking Finks, Nobunaga, and Feitan. I honestly would not be surprised if one or even all of them died at this point, because it would give us a sort of Pito Kite style situation, where we now have to take this main enemy seriously because they've killed off an established powerhouse. Quick visual note, I absolutely love this panel of Feitan. It's very odd to see something like this in manga with this ridiculous amount of negative space around it, but I love that we just focus in on a sliver of hyper-detailed Feitan, getting the perspective of what the guy is seeing through the doorway. But another big death flag is the idea of the Phantom Troop flashback, because as amazing as it is, this is looking real bad for them. We'll put that aside for one moment though, because this flashback is wild. So many questions answered, but also so many new questions asked. And the whole thing has this overall distinct bittersweet flavor to it, especially when we see characters like Pakunoda, Uvogin, and Shalnak, who have long since departed this world. Pakunoda in particular was quite difficult to read in the best way possible. As a child, Togashi has this way of drawing her with such vibrant life, which particularly comes across through her eyes, as opposed to what was the more modern Pakunoda, who looked significantly more weighed down by the world and her experiences. This answered a key question about York New City though. At the end of that arc, Pakunoda shot up 6 troop members with the memory bomb. And I guess the reason why she chose Finks and Shalnak to target, even though they weren't founding members, was because they were childhood friends. This chapter also makes an effort to highlight a special connection between Krollo and Pakunoda. Very sweet, but also very, very not that, knowing what happens in the future. And I also just realized that I don't think we ever saw Krollo's reaction to discovering that Pakunoda had died. However, we did get his incredibly depressed reaction to Shalnak's death, and seeing them together as kids really does make that hit a lot harder. Especially since, along with Franklin, Shalnak appears to have been one of the original Krollo friend trio. I love seeing the initial group divisions in general though. For example, Finks and Feitan, they are a perfect duo. And Feitan's younger design was by far my favorite. It's amazing, just like the hair, man, the hair. Which also applies to Finks. That was pretty amazing as well. But a grouping I did not expect was Machi and Uvogin, because off the top of my head, I don't really recall their dynamic within the troop. So it makes me want to go back and reread York New City to see if there's anything I missed or forgot. When it comes to Uvogin, I think I tend to associate him more closely with Nobunaga. And speaking of Nobunaga, nowhere to be seen in this flashback, which I find funny because he's the one who started it. He's all like, hey guys, remember when we were young? Because I do, even though I wasn't there. When it comes to Franklin, I think this chapter is the most emotion we've seen out of him well, ever. It's similar to Pakunoda, really. Franklin these days is quiet, somber, and has a very realist/dystopian view of the world, depending on your own personal perspective. So basically, what we're seeing here is the corruption of the troop, because right now, in this moment, they're completely innocent, which which I think means that we should prepare ourselves for some pretty intense trauma coming very, very soon. The way the chapter ends is quite unusual for a shonen manga because it's not like a huge cliffhanger or dramatic something or other that leaves a question. It's literally just Crollo and friends of Crollo having fun dubbing anime, which was that's definitely not expected. And the ending sat weirdly with me for a while, but I think that this is Togashi giving Crollo this one last moment of happiness before everything goes to shit, which is unusually merciful of Togashi. And now we do have hints about how said shit is going to occur with the whole child kidnapping subplot, and here is an interesting potential connection. This could be jumping the gun, but one of the kidnappers shown looks quite a bit like Tsuradnik's tattoo artist, who was also a previous member of the Haoli family. I bring that up because right now Hunter x Hunter looks like it's forming a sort of narrative triangle between Kurapika, the Phantom Troupe, and Tsuradnik. Right now every key element seems to revolve around one of those three triangularific parties. Even the Haoli stuff because of their connection to the prince and because the troupe have become involved. Plus, Tsuradnik did end up with the bulk of the Scarlet Eyes and almost certainly Pyro's head, so this story could be playing out in a way where all three of these groups were connected long, long ago. And this is the fatesome climactic outcome. Something very bad is going to happen, which is probably an understatement. And my fear is that that very bad thing is going to happen to one of the two girls that we meet. Specifically the one named Sarasa, because there is no other record of her in the series, to my knowledge. The other girl, however, we actually know her quite well. You may or may not recognize her, but this is Sheila. And the reason why you may not recognize her is because she only appeared in Volume 0, which are the two chapters that cover Kurapika's backstory leading up to the Kurta massacre. Kurapika and Pyro found Sheila lost in the forest with an injured leg. And actually, if you look closely in this chapter, Sheila also appears to have a leg injury. So it's like a permanent thing that she just has. And it's also heavily implied at the end of Volume 0 that Sheila is the one who discovered the Kurta massacre. But this completely flips that perspective on its head. Because now that Sheila is the confirmed childhood friend of the Phantom Troupe, her role could be a lot more sinister. In fact, she may even be one of the two missing troupe members that we've never met. The original number 4 and the original number 8. One of them was killed by Silver and the other was replaced by Hisoka. And no, we don't count Omokage because he's not canon. In fact, we try to forget the Hunter x Hunter movies exist in general. Sheila even has that very same book in Kurapika's flashback, which is about a hunter, and Sheila's dream is to become a professional hunter. She then gave that book to Kurapika and Pyro, which is what eventually leads the Kurta Elder to let Kurapika go out into the outside world. Basically, long story less long, Kurapika would have been killed in the Kurta massacre if not for Sheila. And her role in this could really go either way. Sheila could still be a completely innocent passerby, or she herself could be very much involved with the massacre. Either way, her presence here is massive, completely unexpected, and I cannot predict what direction Togashi is going to take her. Meanwhile, the videotape theme might seem a bit random in this chapter, but it's a callback to chapter 1002, where we see a flashback of the troopers' kids with this unknown videotape, which, and this is no exaggeration, people have been theorizing about for the last 20 years. One kind of out there idea was that this is the chapter Black videotape from Togashi's previous series, Yu Yu Hakusho, which would explain the sudden pessimistic turn the Phantom Troupe took. You know, seeing all the horrificnesses of mankind kinda makes you want to destroy it. But there's also this big web of theories that Hunter x Hunter takes place in the same universe as Yu Yu Hakusho. I don't personally subscribe to it, and we're not going to get into it here, but this videotape has been one of the most perplexing mysteries of the entire series. So to have it solved in such a sweet way is quite satisfying. And what we're seeing play out right now is a story that Togashi has had in mind since the beginning, or at the very least since York New City, I should say. But in Volume 0, he quite famously stated that it was his intention to draw two sides of the Kurta massacre story. Side A was completed in Volume 0 with Kurapika's perspective, and Togashi had every intention to do a Side B with the troops' perspective, but, and I quote, "A lot happened, so I had to shelve it." The next couple of chapters, or even maybe the next chapter itself, may very well show us why the troop massacred the Kurta clan. And I don't think that interested is quite a word enough to describe how I feel about this. Because either way, it is going to be very difficult to pull off. For example, will Togashi try to humanize the troop more, or will he try to demonize them more? Because there was something nice about leaving it as a question mark with no definitive answer. Because if we go with humanizing the troop, then how do you possibly even begin to justify genocide? Even if there's a huge twisty thing that occurs, like say the Kurta clan is somehow involved in all of the child trafficking, which may be the case, because the troop did leave a note with the Meteor City motto, "We'll accept anything you leave here, but don't ever take anything away from us." Implying that the Kurta clan did that thing and took something away from them. And then there's also the whole only life can pay for life part of the Meteor City law. So maybe the Kurta clan weren't exactly the paragon of innocence that we thought they were, but that would be such a wild and hard to sell twist. And even then, I don't think there's a way to justify the troop troop's actions, so we're walking a very, very thin tightrope here. And on the other hand, if we're heading towards demonizing them more, then it puts a huge burden on the aspect of what inevitably corrupted them. It needs to be something pretty damn big to take them from these delightful innocent kidlets to, well, effectively war criminals. So again, I think we should very much brace for the worst. I'm hoping that the tattoo guy does turn out to be the same one who works for Saradnik, and that the fourth prince has a deeper story wedged between the troop and Kurapika, because it would just tie this whole Succession War stuff together very, very neatly. And look, Saradnik is the one who ended up with the bulk of the Scarlet Eyes as well as the head, so he may have had some sort of first choice preference here. We could even end up in like a weird three-way scenario, like Kurapika versus Krollo versus Saradnik. Or maybe even Krollo and Kurapika could team up, and that's probably not going to happen. But Child Krollo is quite the sight to behold. All of the joy of Gon mixed with the intellectual potential of Kurapika, and the parallels between Krollo and Kurapika have always been incredibly strong. What with the whole genius growing up in societies persecuted by the greater world thing. But that aside, I'm really glad that Togashi is finally getting the opportunity to tell a story that he's wanted to tell for 2 decades, even if it does make me feel very nervous for the imminent future of the troop. To be fair, we've known that something like this has been coming for a long time. In the Volume 0 interview, Togashi did pretty straightforwardly state in regards to Kurapika and the troop, they will all die. But I guess now that it's finally here, I'm just feeling somewhat reluctant to let these characters go. However, if there's anything I've learned about stories over the last lifetime of consuming them, it's that heartfelt flashbacks are often used to tenderize our impressions of characters in order to make their eventual deaths hit that much harder. And I think that Hunter x Hunter is about to hit us pretty damn hard.